Illuminati, Ronin's back, slicing through the noise with a culture attack. Pop culture, films, and the world we see. Deleted scenes, where the truth runs free. Take care, stay strong, we're breaking the mold. Be safe, stay healthy, let the story unfold. From watch parties, reviews, to the news we spin. Deleted scenes, yeah, this is how we win. Take care, stay strong, we're breaking the mold. Be safe, stay healthy, let the story unfold. From watch parties, reviews, to the news we spin. Deleted scenes, yeah, this is how we win. Let's roll.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen out there in YouTube land. I am Deleted Scenes, human being, American, and YouTuber Ronin. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's episode of Reserved Seats. I want to first off say hello to everyone currently joining us on X. I can't see you, but I know that you're there. And I want to say hello to FK8C2005, sometimes known as Tim. Rest in peace, Rob Reiner. Yeah, we got this news in the last couple of hours. It seems that he and his wife have passed away in an incident that took place inside their home that's still being investigated. I don't want to go into detail. I don't know the whole story yet. It's still under investigation. This all took place tonight. I don't want to speculate. He made some of my favorite films. Princess Bride, Spinal Tap, of course, did two of the best Stephen King adaptations, Misery and Stand By Me. And I didn't always agree with the man, but I didn't wish anything like this to befall him. And it's a very tragic situation, and I don't want to speculate on it. And when we learn more, I'll speak out. But for right now, let's let the police do their job, investigate, find out what happened, and we'll go from there. Very tragic situation all the way around. Shouldn't have happened. And all right. We're going to bring on my guest for the evening. He's been on earlier this year. And this is kind of a part two. Let's see what he's been up to since he was last year. Ladies and gentlemen, writer Albert Lanier.
Hello. Hey, good evening to you. Nice to be back on Reserved Seats. I guess I have a seat reserved for me, at least for this evening.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, you were on earlier this year, I believe, episode 16, if I remember correctly. And so what has the second half of the year been for you as far as...
The second half of the year, right now what I'm doing is I'm just finishing up on interviews. When I was on your show originally, I was on a promotional tour for my Substack newsletters, which are about film, of course, Final Cut and Retro Review. And I'm here to talk to a certain extent about Retro Review, but more about movies. And Retro Review is my newsletter. Of the two film newsletters I have on Substack, Retro Review is solely reviews. And I review movies that are either forgotten, little known, or completely unknown. And that's the purview largely of Retro Review. And that, of course, can be found at thumbsdown.substack.com. But so in terms of what I've been doing, I've kind of taken a slight break from writing both Final Cut, my other film newsletter, and Retro Review, although I made a couple exceptions. I recently did a interview for my podcast, which is also one of my podcasts, which is also called Final Cut. It's a film podcast. I interviewed a filmmaker called Rolf Konevsky. Now, I don't know if you're into the horror genre. Are you into horror movies?
I am to an extent, yes.
Okay. So I don't know if you've heard of the movie There's Nothing Out There.
No, I'm afraid I haven't.
That's a movie you might want to check out because it was directed by Rolf Konevsky. It was his first film. He's gone on to do movies such as Bus Party to Hell, a number of horror movies. Actually, he's worked across a number of genres. He's done family films, done horror movies, done comedies. I knew him primarily from a couple of comedies he had done in the 2000s. Pretty Cool, and which is kind of a throwback sex comedy. And another of the throwback sex comedies, Pretty Cool too. And so I did an interview with him. Actually, I did an interview on Final Cut, my newsletter on Substack, my other newsletter, in October of this past October. And interesting, one of the things we talked about was a movie of his which didn't get released in the US until recently. It's on streaming now, called Video Store the Movie. I think it was originally known as Tomorrow by Midnight. And it's an interesting movie. Unfortunately, I haven't got the chance to see it, but because it has been shown, I think it just recently got on streaming. I think it's on Amazon. I think it's also available on YouTube to some extent. I'm not quite sure about the YouTube, but that's what I was told, both Amazon and YouTube. So I interviewed Rolf for my Final Cut newsletter. People can check that out if they want. They can go to lanier.substack.com if they want to check that out. And then I guess with Video Store, the movie coming out, streaming, I ended up doing an interview for Final Cut, the podcast. And that's been out recently. And you can also go there to check out the podcast. There's a part 1 and part 2 of the interview. So it's 2 episodes. So I've kind of done that, even though I would kind of shut down both Final Cut and Retro Review for the year in terms of working and writing articles and so forth. I kind of made some exceptions. I kind of shut down in September when I was doing my promotional tour, about the time I was on your show previously. And so also on Retro Review, my review newsletter, I did a review of one of his movies, meaning Rolf Konevsky's films, Pretty Cool too, which I understand is not really available. It's out of print, I think, on DVD. Mm-hmm. So people can check that out at my Retro Review newsletter, at Retro Review newsletter. They can also go to, I have a promotional page on Facebook for both newsletters, and it's entitled Final Cut and Retro Review Publications page. And so I advise people to go there on Facebook and check out. I have like promo images there, and there's galleries of pictures from some of the movies that I feature, or at least Rolf Konevsky also. Some gallery, certain galleries. And so basically I'm near the end of the year in regards to all my projects and all that I'm doing. And I've got, let me see, I've got a booking. I'm doing a New Year's Eve show on the radio. So I'm doing a radio show. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, the last big thing that I'm doing. So as regards my YouTube channel, the strange thing is this. I'm kind of in a weird position now because during the promotional tour, I ended up being interviewed on a sports show. And I'm not a sports fanatic, but I do follow the NFL. And I was asked to come on a local sports show in California and do an NFL segment. I think it's called Hot Topics. So I do that every week, or I have for several weeks now. This is week 3 of the NFL. And so that's kind of the latest thing that I've been doing. But I'm slated to do a New Year's Eve show. So that's my next big thing. So I'm just trying to finish out all my interviews really for the year and do the New Year's Eve show. I think I'm supposed to do a commercial tomorrow for that. So yeah, that's the real big thing coming up. So as for writer Albert Lanier, which is the name of my YouTube channel, its formal title is at writer Albert Lanier 3434. I decided to experiment with a sports show called The Wise Guy Show. So I do that short form sports show about football. I've also done some special videos, just kind of expressing myself on a few things. So that's been about it in regards to my YouTube channel. People want to check out my YouTube channel, they can go to writer Albert Lanier 3434, or should I say at writer Albert Lanier 3434. They can check out the live streams there. The name of the channel, again, besides the formal title, is of course just writer Albert Lanier, if you just want to search it without the at and the 3434. So yeah, basically that's what I've been up to and what I'm up to right now.
And of course, yeah, you do have to make that distinction because YouTube just did the whole thing of reverting everyone back to their old handles for some reason. So yeah. Yeah,
I know. Well, that's a handle that that I've kept. I didn't change my handle with my YouTube channel. It's always been writer Albert Lanier, which I think is a perfectly good name for it. I like the name writer Albert. I mean, it says everything it needs to say in terms of YouTube. But don't get me started about YouTube. I just did. It's funny. I did a special video recently, special live stream, because I never really kind of, you know, the image that's actually in the beginning of this, you know, the image here that's being used of me, that comes from my special videos. I wear the glasses to separate that from the show that I do, and I do a show called Outro, which is about being interviewed on shows. So I just wore the glasses to make it different, to differentiate it. I did a video recently about the YouTube recap. So if anybody wants to see any of my special live streams, that's a good one to check out. Because I was taken aback by the YouTube recap. I don't know how you felt about it, but I was sort of like, really? Because I saw kind of that same thing in Facebook. Facebook did something like that. It was okay. But YouTube did, okay, these are the videos that went to in the channels that you went to and all this. I'm like, yeah, I know because I was there.
Yeah, that's kind of, that was.
To quote Sybil Shepherd in the pilot of Moonlighting, I know, I was there. I saw me do it. I mean,
yeah.
Do I really need Alphabet, Google, YouTube to tell me what channels that I went to a lot and what, essentially music? You know, I mean, speaking of Moonlighting, it turns out that Al Jarreau apparently is the artist that I've listened to the most in regards to music. Of course, he did the theme for Moonlighting. So apparently that's 6 degrees of separation in this entire couple sentences I've been talking about. But yeah, the YouTube recap was just why they decided to do this for people, I have no idea. I mean, did they not? I mean, I know you got a lot going on in life. You got people got jobs and families and all kinds of things. I don't know why I don't know why they needed to remind those of us with channels what other channels we were on and what videos we saw.
Yeah.
Why? Like, you know, what would be nice, I think, is to have a report in regards to money that people who are monetized make. Like, I'm not monetized. Right. I don't make money off of YouTube. But I would think
people who are monetized really don't make a whole lot, to be honest.
That's what I'm saying. But if you did something like that, that could only be seen, say, for that content creator, and you did a recap of their, like you did a spreadsheet or you did like a accountant's book, like a book of what what you made through advertising, AdSense, and Google AdSense, and super chats, and all of that. That would be useful to content creators on YouTube, telling them what channels they went to, how do they benefit from that. I mean, again, I saw this sort of thing with Facebook. It was fine when Facebook kind of did it, but with YouTube, I'm like, why do we need to be reminded of what we did? Like I said, if people want to go, they could check that video out. But anyway, I need to get back. I don't want to get too far afield and digress further.
I get your point, because I looked at it and it did seem redundant to me, and it's like I think there are more important things that I would like to know about concerning my channel. Really, the financials, or hey, at least let us know what we can or can't do, so you don't demonetize us and not let us know why, because there's that going on too. But
there you go. I was going to say, doesn't that seem like an important thing to know? Hey, here are some aspects for next year. Recap. Oh, here are some aspects. Like, say you got new community standards or guidelines or new aspects. That might be a good time to do something like that. But apparently that's not important. And apparently how much you make as a monetized content creator isn't important. And I could see why they wouldn't do that, because, they want the money train coming to them. They don't want it in your station.
No.
I mean, I shouldn't talk about that further, because I'm sure Alphabet and Google won't like that, but that's the reality, So instead it's going to be, hey, you watched a lot of cat videos. To people who
they're on to me.
Cat pets.
Yeah.
Wow. Isn't that useful information?
Yeah.
Not. Anyway, I think I've digressed about as far on that topic as I need to. So check out the video. I think it's What's with the YouTube recap. Check it out. Anyway, so the thing that's interesting to me is when I created Final Cut. I talked about my newsletters to some extent last time I was here. Mm-hmm. And I created Final Cut, and that was intended for analytical essays and various types of essays, to do the kind of writing about film I never got to do when I was a film reviewer. Because I only did reviews, and I did interviews, and I did coverage. It was about it. So I was interested in doing that. And I have to be honest, I never wanted to do reviewing again, because I did it. I did it for several years, did it for 8 years. And I covered festivals for 15 years, film festivals, my hometown, for about 15 years. So I'm like, I've been there and I've done that, and I'm fine. I'm satisfied with it. And I didn't want to go and review again, do any reviews again, any kind of movie or film reviews. Not because I have anything against the form of film reviewing. I think it's easy to do. And that's not dismissive. I'm not trying to be dismissive. It's just easy to review movies, really. Right? I think it's kind of related to basic essay writing, that you learn in high school and college to an extent, except you want to at least write that a lot better. But, I kind of reluctantly created Final Cut. No, not Final Cut. I created Retro Review first as a section on Final Cut, and it was there last year. And then in May of this year, I spun off Retro Review as its own newsletter. And I think the reason was that I found that I was getting all these ideas, all these films that I could review were coming to me faster than ideas for analytical essays and other essays for Final Cut. And I thought, it's going to be nothing but reviews if I don't do something. So I decided separate it and make it its own. So the first review I did ever for retro review when it was on Final Cut was of the movie The Late Show with Lily Tomlin and Art Carney. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have not. No.
Okay, I highly recommend it. I think it's a wonderful movie. And that was the first one that I did, and I was really, I hadn't seen the movie before, and I saw it, and it was a great choice to start that section, which eventually became a newsletter on its own, because it was a movie I hadn't seen before, and when I saw it, I fell in love with it completely. Directed, I think it was written directed by Robert Benton, who had done Kramer versus Kramer and Places in the Heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he had also co-written Bonnie and Clyde, I think, if I recall correctly. And so I started with that for the section. And so The Late Show was one of the early films that I did for Final Cut. I'm sorry, for retro review when it was on Final Cut. Another early film was The Year of the Dragon, or Year of the Dragon, directed by Michael Cimino, 1985, which is it's really a terrible movie. It's a horrible movie. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have.
You have. And what is your take on Year of the Dragon?
That was fine. You know, I didn't think it was the best movie ever made. I felt like it's one of those movies that feels like it's edited together by a pack of hamsters. But other than that,
I think the pack of hamsters were actually the test audience. I think they were the test audience for the film. It was either that or guinea pigs. I don't know. Yeah. Probably a mix of both. Go on.
Yeah, I've seen better movies. I've seen worse. That's kind of my feeling on it. You know. Yeah, it's a movie. It happened. I saw it. Move on. You know.
Is that your attitude toward movies in general?
Not always. It depends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing that I'm getting personally kind of tired of is all of these kind of reboots and sequels and all of that. And you know, I'll use this as an example. Is we now have a live action Moana film getting ready to come out. The live action remake of Moana. That's, from the looks of the trailer, is going to be mostly CGI anyway. So it's kind of like, what's the point of that? You have a film that came out like 6-7 years ago, and now you're doing a live action, quote unquote, live action version that's going to be.
That sounds about right for Disney.
CGI. It's like, what's the point of that?
That sounds about right for Disney, because one of the things Disney's done over the past, if not 10 years and longer, is basically take aspects of their, what I would call, intellectual property or IP, whether it's in their amusement parks, or whether it's in their movies. They've taken that and they've turned it into movies. So basically, they're taking anything that they own or that belongs to them, because they're very much about ownership in a way that even other studios aren't, and in securing those rights. I think they did like a movie years ago with, I think it was Eddie Murphy. It was the Haunted Mansion movie. Mm-hmm. And like I said, that was a ride. I remember going to that ride when I went to Disney World. Like I said, they're taking everything that's either an intellectual property component or ownership or property they own, and they turn it into movies. So if they do an animated version of Moana, live action makes sense, because they can then exploit the audience. They're not the exact same people that saw it, obviously. They can exploit the audience that's interested in that film and say, look, if you love the animated version, you'll love this live action version, because you've got a new version of the same thing. which is partly, I think, what part of what the majors, what I call the studios,
Mhm.
uh, part of what the majors do. You know what they do. I've explained this to people. I stated years ago, and it's still kind of relevant. What changed? One of the things that changed in Hollywood is the fact that they began producing movies for what I call pre-sold audiences, meaning the audiences are already sold and already have bought into and literally bought something that relates to the version of the movie. They bought a book, or I don't know, um, or they watched a TV show, or they did something that they were interested in. And you saw this, I think, especially take place in the 90s, late 90s.
Mhm.
This is where I think the pre-sold audience and the change into what Hollywood still slightly is now occurred, because you had the Harry Potter movies come out, in the 2000s, early 2000s, I think.
Mhm.
And you also had in late 90s, very, very late 90s, the prequel to the Star Wars movies. So that came out, the first one, the Phantom Menace.
Mhm.
And so what that's doing is that, of course, was a new movie, but it was part of an old series, right?
Right.
And Harry Potter was an adaptation of a book series, right? Hadn't been in movies before, I don't believe. But they're going with, as I mentioned before, they're producing movies that can then be aimed at audiences interested in the predecessor, whatever the movie is an adaptation at, or whatever the movie deals with in whatever form previously that the audience had digested it or consumed it. And so, what you have found over, I would say, at this point, over about 25 years or over 25 years, is what I call the major studios and some other companies targeting pre-sold, what I call pre-sold audiences. So it's been the pre-sold mania, if you could call it that. And that's why the studios have been producing superhero movies. They're producing superhero movies because there's an audience that reads comic books, and there's an audience that goes to Comic Cons. And the Comic Cons have become vehicles, events where they can promote. I mean, now, so that's why those are huge events. The movies themselves are huge, big budgeted, meaning the superhero movies and the comic book movies. And also, you look at some of the stars, rather large stars, at least for the present. And so, what you're seeing again, audiences that are interested, comic book audiences interested in superheroes, pre sold, that will go out and watch the movie. And of course, that's probably the prototype for the pre-sold audience, because those audiences will not only go and watch the movie, they'll buy any books that are a part of it, they'll buy any shirts, they'll buy any dolls or toys or other collectibles. So that's been my thesis and my theory about how Hollywood operates in regards to production, largely in terms of what would now be called content, but what I would call movies and films.
But I feel, though, is that a lot of the what are referred to now as the more original films, the one-offs, so to speak, kind of get lost in the shuffle of all of the Moanas, the Avatars, and you know, one of the reasons, or at least the way it was always explained to me anyway, was that the whole reason why we had multiplexes were you could have the franchise films next to the one-off original films next to the independent films. But as time went on, it just seemed like, okay, you have the big franchise film on like 5, 6, 7 screens, and all of the smaller movies were starting to get pushed out.
Well, what I will say is this. I think what happened is in the 90s, especially, part of what the success of Miramax was in penetrating the multiplexes with the degree of independent films and foreign films, foreign language films, or what I would call international features now. That was part of their success as a company, as a, I don't know, studio is quite the word to put it, mini major, you could say. It was, and as a distributor, obviously, it was about targeting the multiplexes as best they could. But fundamentally, the problem is, as you know, that when you look at the larger films, they're going to play in more theaters if you have a multiplex. And it will crowd out the smaller movies. So there will probably be room for maybe one or two, or if you're fortunate, three, maybe indie films or smaller films. And that's why those movies generally, when it came to theaters, would play in your indie-oriented or art house, quote-unquote, art house theaters. Mm-hmm. Because those theaters were basically set up to play those types of features. There was one in my hometown that played that. I think it was known as the Art House. It's out of business now, but it was set up, and that's where you saw indie movies and foreign films and so forth. At least that was, and so, yeah. I mean, to be brutally honest, I'm in an interesting position because I was a film reviewer for 8 years. And I went to film festivals, and I went into thus multiplexes to have to go to screenings. But I haven't been in a movie theater in, I can't tell you how many years, more than 5 or 6. So the way theaters are now, probably, I assume that, it probably, again, is what I probably described. If they have these other indie films or foreign films, it's probably maybe a sprinkling of them in these theaters. I don't know, because again, I haven't seen a movie in an actual theater in probably more than 6 years. So I'm not quite sure. But getting back to earlier to what I was talking about in regards to my reviews, yeah, I didn't care much for Year of the Dragon, so which is a terrible movie, horribly racist movie. It was controversial at the time. It's interesting, however, that movie was filmed, I believe, mostly in North Carolina. It wasn't filmed in New York, where it's set. It's set in like Mott Street, Chinatown in New York City. But it was filmed, I think, in Wilmington. Was it North Carolina? I think it was North Carolina, because I think Dino De Laurentiis, who I think was one of the producers of the film, I think he had a facility there. He had a production facility there. So it's been interesting because for me, in regards to getting back and reviewing movies again, because I didn't want to do it, but I think watching some movies that I hadn't seen before, my enthusiasm for the movies translated. And I was like, I can't wait to go and write about this. And I did. I wrote about The Late Show, and I wrote about a number of other films before I made the choice in May of this year, 2025, to spin off Retro Review and create it as a its own wholly owned or its own newsletter. So it was interesting. I guess I sort of changed my mind. I've had a great time. And I think part of it for me is going back and looking at before when I was reviewing movies, I had to do them at film festivals because as a freelancer, I couldn't review movies full time. I could only do it part time. So got to get my credentials and get my tickets and all that I needed to go out and cover this festival for 12 days, which was the major film festival that I did, the Hawaii Film Festival, and um, and and to go and see I don't know how many films. I think it was usually anywhere between it was over 30. It was anywhere from 30 to 40 to 50 films per festival for me. Um, and that's basically how I reviewed movies. I did maybe a couple festivals a year, two or three, I think, usually. And now doing retro review, it's just simple because I don't have to go anywhere. I can just go and write, do my research on a movie and then write about it. So it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to review movies. I don't have to go and rush between this theater and this screening and that screening, and then go interview a director and all of that. It's a lot easier.
I was watching a show the other day where one of the critics was discussing being at TIFF this past year, and saying that they had up to 200 movies at that festival, and I went, well, there's no way, in that period of time that everybody is going to get to every movie. So it's like it makes sense in that case why a certain number of movies are going to fall through the cracks. Now, the one time I ever went to a film festival, but they had one in Charleston, South Carolina, for a couple of years. Didn't take, unfortunately, but I went one year, and I would say, okay, there were maybe 20, 25 movies. And they were spaced out in a way where if you had that opportunity, over the space of the time of the festival took place, you could theoretically get to every one of them. I got to a few, and had a pretty good time. Met some of the people involved with the film, met a director, met Nick Searcy at that festival, and but again, it didn't have this. And stop me if I'm wrong, if this is different from your experience. It didn't have that corporatized feel to it that the film festivals, at least from somebody outside looking in like me, it feels like it has this more corporate feel to it now. Instead of just like love of film, if you get my meaning.
Well, you have to understand that a film festival is sponsored often by corporations. They have sponsors. Like the festival I went to had sponsors. And, they're more often actually not, depends on what kind of festival. If they're like a nonprofit or something like that. You also have to understand that some festivals are what you call market. So next month, unless they changed I don't know if they changed the month they're going to do this. I think Sundance is still in January, if I recall correctly. Like Sundance is basically a market festival, meaning you go there, people go there from the studios. It's not simply audiences. People go there from the studios and all these other production companies and all these other distributors to look at movies, because that's where deals can occur to distribute movies, especially since a lot of movies are shown as they're independent films or films without distributors and films without distributors. So Sundance is one, and then you have like the American film market. And then of course you have the sort of, you mentioned TIFF, so I think that's a Toronto International Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
That's a market festival, right? They have a market there. And of course, because that's one of the big festivals globally, Toronto, Venice, and of course Cannes. And Cannes, of course, has the festival and a market. So different kinds of screenings. So remember that festivals, depending on which festival you go to, is all about about the business, because it all relates to the film business. And so film festivals they're about it to the people who go to watch the movies. But as somebody who's covered film festivals and been there as a member of the press, I'm not there simply to love movies. I'm there to write about movies. I'm there to talk to the people who make movies. So ultimately, it's business. It's never pure art, whatever that means, but it's a better representation of art because there are movies that'll get screened at festivals that may not get a distributor or get seen anywhere else.
So, since we're kind of on that subject, have you seen anything recently, either an older film or something newer, that you felt was kind of went under the radar, that you think
Oh,
that
my,
people should get out and see?
well, my whole newsletter deals with stuff that's under the radar.
Mhm.
So I can probably say a laundry list of movies that probably even some that are better known to film buffs or film lovers that probably a lot of people wouldn't know or aren't be aware of. In terms of retro review, I have, of course, a variety of movies. So I would say of the movies that I've reviewed, and again, the whole point are movies that I've forgotten, little known or unknown. These are films that could be studio movies, it could be independent movies, it doesn't really matter. I'd say one movie that I reviewed this for the section before it became a separate newsletter. I would say Psycho 2 is one. That's a movie I did a review for the retro review section of Final Cut. And I was on a podcast earlier this year, called Parallax Views, where it came up in conversation. The host wanted to discuss Psycho 2. Psycho 2 to me, and in my review, when I talked about Psycho, I've said that Psycho 2 is every bit as good as the original. And the thing about that movie is, besides the fine performance by Anthony Perkins, is that it's a real sequel. It's kind of a rare movie in the sense of that you get sequels, but you don't get too many real sequels. You don't get movies that continue the characters or the people, but in some different and probably completely 360-degree type of story. And if you look at Psycho 2, I would say it's 360 degrees because Norman Bates is the victim in Psycho 2, at least up until the end, which I can't give away. But he's the victim. And the thing that I noted in my review of Psycho 2 was that the movie is a unique horror movie, thriller, I could say even slasher film, but certainly a better slasher film than most slasher films. But it's a unique horror movie in that it has a sympathetic antagonist. The Norman Bates character is an antagonist. He's essentially, in the first film, he was classified as the villain of the piece, right? Mm-hmm. But he's not the villain of the piece in the sequel. That's a big reason why that movie worked. And I think Todd Holland, who went on to direct Fright Night and Child's Play, did a wonderful job with that script. and gave, I think he gave Perkins a reason to do that movie again and to become Norman Bates again. And it's a movie, and so that's the interesting thing about it. It's a sympathetic antagonist. We feel sorry for Norman in that movie, and we want him to do well. That's the interesting thing, even considering what occurred in the original Psycho. So it's a very intriguing film. I think it's a real sequel, and it's a great movie. I think it's every bit as good as Psycho. I would also say Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure, which came out in the 90s, a great horror movie. Fantastic film. He's a first-rate filmmaker. And that is a great film. I think it's a near masterpiece. That's a movie I reviewed in retro review. I don't even really want to talk about it that much. I'd rather people just go and watch it and take it in themselves. It's a great film. I've reviewed a number of movies. The original Insomnia, I think it is. Most people, if they're aware of Insomnia, know the film done by Christopher Nolan, the American remake, which is a very good movie. There's no doubt about that. It's a very good film. There are people who don't like it, I'm sure. But I thought it was a very good film with an intriguing cast. The original is a good film. And I think it's very different. It's a kind of moodier, and I think a lot more interesting thriller, especially in Stellan Skarsgård's performance. And that's the key there, is that this is a man, and this is, I think, the thing that I noted in my review about Insomnia is that this is a movie that deals with the reality of life for officials and individuals. And the realities of life are that people try to cover their own ass. They try to protect themselves. They screw up. They mess up. And when they do, they don't want their lives fouled up. And so they will do what they have to try to protect themselves. And that's always an interesting premise and an interesting aspect of movies. But that movie kind of deals with that in a way that is not grounded in the verities of the simplistic structures that Hollywood often not only constructs but foists on audiences. And that's why I think Insomnia is so good.
Yeah, I've seen the Nolan version. I actually do have a copy of the version with Skarsgård, and I really do need to sit down one of these days and watch it. I've really been looking forward to seeing it, and it's kind of a recent buy for me, so I haven't really had a chance to. I just went out and took all these Black Friday deals, and I have like a whole stack now that I have to go through. And Insomnia is definitely one that I want to get to. As I always say, for all the movies I have seen, you would be surprised by what I haven't. Like, I haven't seen Insomnia. I'm aware of Cure, but I've never seen it. One movie that always seems to escape me, no matter what I do, is The Third Man.
Oh, Carol Reed's movie. I love that movie.
It's like every time, it's like, even if I plan it in advance to sit down and watch that movie, something will stop me, and I never get to it. Guillermo del Toro's film Kronos is the same way. Something always happens, and I always miss the last 20 minutes. So it's just it's one of those things. It's just like
Well,
no matter what I do.
right. Well, Third Man, I can only recommend it with the most glowing with in the most glowing terms because that's a personal favorite of mine of the Orson Welles movies that he acted in. It's probably one of the best small roles I've ever seen in a movie because everyone talks about Harry Lime and then you finally see him. The lead up is fantastic. Lead up is fantastic. And so I can only recommend it in the strongest terms. I don't want to say anything because you haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to talk too much about it.
Right. But yeah. I have always, even when I was younger, I would always go for these sort of out of the box choices. Letting me pick. Back, and of course, this was back during the time where I would go to a movie every week or every other week.
Mm.
It was always the mistake of, oh no, don't ask me, what movie to go see because I will pick something out of left field.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was, I'm 8 years old, and I'm like 8, 9 years old. And it's like I want to see Gandhi.
Oh,
And I
interesting.
would be like a 9-year-old kid sitting there watching this three-hour
movie.
plus biopic. And, I'm not bored. I'm not running around a theater like I'm on a sugar high. I'm not asking to go to the bathroom every 5 minutes. I am there, and I sat through that entire film, start to even finish. I even stayed through I wanted to stay through the credits, even though the credits are like 15 minutes freaking long. But I stayed through it, and I didn't want to leave until I knew it was over. And that's just kind of the kid that I was, and I wanted to go see The Right Stuff and A Passage to India, and
I was interested in those movies. I was a teenager by the time those movies had come out, and I got to see them eventually. The Right Stuff is a movie I may review next year for retro review. That's a movie I have my eye on. It's a fantastic movie. The Right Stuff that was an interesting film because it was a movie that came out in 1983, directed by Philip Kaufman. Wonderful cast, including Ed Harris and Dennis Quaid and a variety of other actors. And that movie underperformed at the box office, but it became a hit on home video. And I remember because I used to hang out at a video store near where I lived. And sometimes I'd look at the charts because I was friendly with the owner. And that The Right Stuff was kicking ass in video rentals. It's one of those movies. This was the importance of video. I'll just say a little about video here. The importance of video was that it really did, because it was a second tier market. It was a market that really allowed movies to make money, even if it's not talked about that much. For example, I did a review recently. The last review I did on Retro Review was of a sequel. I talked about Rolf Konevsky. It was a sequel called Pretty Cool 2. A sequel to a movie called Pretty Cool. This is kind of a throwback comedy, like sex comedy, throwback from the, in terms of the 80s, even though it was in 2002 or so when it came out. This was a movie, I don't think it got much of a theatrical release, if it did. And what happened is it started selling out at video stores. People were renting this movie. And that's why they did the sequel, Pretty Cool 2, to it, because that movie was doing well in the video markets, video store markets. And so the video stores are or were important. And they were important because it was really like an ability financially for movies to make money. Because before video, basically you had what? TV sales, networks, cable to a minor extent. And then there was video. I hear that's the case with TV shows too, like Family Guy. Family Guy was a show, for example. I'm not a TV critic or TV reviewer, so I had nothing to do with TV per se. Like I never did anything about TV. I wasn't in that business. But Family Guy got moved around different time slots on Fox and then got canceled. The show went on DVD and it sold like hotcakes. And that's why that show came back, because it was canceled. But it came back because of DVD sales. It was racking up the sales. And I guess the rentals. And so it's a kind of lifeline for a number of movies, or was. Now, I don't know about Blu-rays. I guess it would be the same principle, but it's very different now that you have streaming. So streaming is kind of like, streaming to me has always been kind of a combination of like a video store and cable. Mm-hmm. It's always been kind of this mixture. And streaming has kind of changed, has really changed things. So now you have people talking about, hey, get the physical media, which is what they call DVDs and Blu-rays and so forth, even video. Buy physical media and get it and save it and take a look at it. And I think that's good advice because, not every film gets to be streamed. And streaming can be, based on deals and sales and other aspects. But that's the tricky part about streaming. Like the review that I did for Pretty Cool 2, that movie isn't available. Like I said, it isn't on video, it's not on DVD, it's not available on streaming either. So, and that got good numbers for me in terms of views when I did that review, which was a big surprise to me. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that's important when we take a look at the video store market and physical media and all that. So I don't mind streaming, but I mean, if I had my way, the studios would largely get out of streaming and leave it to the streamers. Paramount would divest, and Warner Brothers and all these others, because they're losing millions of dollars off of streaming. Mm-hmm. And as far as I'm concerned, they would just license it. But they want to do things their way, I guess. But yeah, it's interesting to me. It's interesting coming from how things have changed to me. It's a lot. One of the reasons I'm so happy to do retro review is I got the chance to review movies because I could only review new movies which I saw at film festivals, which is perfectly fine with me. Or a couple I saw in theaters or elsewhere, or other theaters elsewhere on other occasions. But with retro review, the nice thing is going and reviewing older movies and movies in the past. I don't think I would ever have had that chance if I hadn't decided to have this section on Final Cut and then to do this as a newsletter. So I've really kind of enjoyed it. I really have had a good time doing it. And it's been fun to write some of these reviews. It's been really fun. And it's been surprising what gets views in regards to Substack, and what reviews get more attention and what get more views and others that don't. I'll give you an example. I think it's like Clues. Yeah, this is Clue, the anniversary of the movie Clue, I think. Or it will be the anniversary of the movie Clue. I did a review of Clue on Retro Review, and I invite people to go and check it out. I did a review of Clue because I thought, first of all, I think the reason why that movie didn't succeed was the fact that one of the reasons was I don't think people understood that it's fundamentally a game. I think somebody had made a comment. That it's fundamentally a game, and that what the audience needs to do, and that the movie is essentially created as a game. First of all, it's a farce, and it's also kind of a physical comedy. Mm-hmm. But it's also a game, because the whole point is who did it. And when you have the three different endings, you have three different chances. But that's what happens in games, like video games. Like, you go this route and you end up in this location or in this area, or you could end up winning here, or you could end up losing your character or your avatar's life there, and so it's game over for you. But I think the reason why people didn't understand Clue was, I don't think that now when you have a generation, or you have generations that play games, because that came out in the 80s, Clue did. And it's not that people didn't play games, but it was, I think it was still arcade games. Video games are still in arcades, and games were still, you still have board games. Clue was, after all, based on a board game. But I think that the conceit, whether the filmmakers want to admit it or not, is that you're actually watching a movie that's actually a game. And I don't think that they were able to convey that in the marketing or convey that in the promotion of this movie. I think they conveyed the different endings, but I don't think they were able to do that. And I think that's been the mistake in regards to Clue. But it was interesting. When I wrote the review for Clue, I didn't get a lot of views on that for whatever reason, which makes sense because Clue was not a success when it came out, which is a shame because it had a terrific cast. And it's a strong movie. It's a good, solid comedy, and it's a strong movie.
I've seen it recently. It still holds up. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's a terrific game. And I would argue, because it's the 40th anniversary, Clue should be marketed toward people who are into board games, people who are into video games, people who are into, I don't know what they call it, at-home video games, or the PlayStation, or the whatever. Shows how old I am. That's why I think when you're trying to push this movie out, I don't know if it's going to be on Blu-ray, or I don't know if they're going to do a special screening somewhere or anything. But I think that's what they should target. Those are the people that they should target. And I think people misunderstood that movie. I honestly did. I don't think it was marketed correctly. That's one of the problems with movies. They're not marketed correctly. That's to me, it's one of the biggest problems in regards to movies from the major studios or other distributors or other. They don't know how to market the movie.
And that's even if you're able to market the movie at all, because of course, if you are an independent or even smaller than an independent film, if you're just somebody who went out and made your movie on your own, you don't have that you don't have the what is the word I am looking for?
Marketing budget.
You don't have a marketing budget. You don't have the access to marketing period, let alone a budget. And I think that's what hurts a lot of the smaller films, and why you really do need that word of mouth when it comes to a smaller film.
I think that's a good point. In the old days, I remember seeing a documentary about the Golden Globes, and one of the filmmakers that was interviewed for it said, in the old days, or I guess when his movie came out, basically in the 70s and 80s, was still print advertising. I was changing in the 80s, obviously, and even the 70s. But years ago, it was print. still print ads, and movies were kind of rolled out, right? Like, depending on the kind of movie, if you decided to roadshow a movie, right? Um, you would, movies were opening up in LA or in New York. It would open up in a couple of cities. You'd see how well they do, and then you do a wider release, right? And then that changed to releasing it in 200 or 2,000 theaters. Let's just say 200 theaters on opening day. And then it may, depending on how well it does, you increase it to 3 or 4 or 500. So it's a blanketed approach. That's still probably the approach now. And of course, they don't use print advertising. They use, at this time, online advertising. So they're advertising online, and to probably some extent on TV. I don't watch TV anymore. I haven't in years. So
I don't either. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. That's something I don't know about current movies. Whether I assume they're advertised on television. I haven't seen TV ads, like, because I don't watch TV. But it's changed over the years, like anything. It's changed over the years. And yeah, word of mouth was very important. And it is important when it comes to smaller movies, indie films, and also films from other countries, international films. And it can also, word of mouth is important, but also marketing and promoting it. And so you can promote with very little money, so long as you do it right. But yeah, it's a lot more difficult. But my view has always been, based on what I've seen over the years, the problem with a lot of movies is they're poorly promoted and they're poorly marketed. I think Clue is an example. Probably they weren't able to market it the way they should have. And again, to me, my analysis is that this is a movie that is fundamentally a game. And it's interesting. I didn't get a lot of views on that review when I put it out, so it was interesting. What I was surprised in regards to a movie that I reviewed that got more views, or I guess more people reading it than I expected, was another movie from the 80s called Ruthless People, with Danny DeVito and Bette Midler. That did pretty well. And I think that's one of the better comedies of the 80s. Was a fairly substantial box office hit, and a great, it was sort of a wonderful combination of bedroom farce and heist, and kidnap comedy. It was just kind of it was a kind of movie, I think, that hit the zeitgeist at the right time. Really good cast. Yeah, very enjoyable. That did pretty well in regards to reviews. So I never really know, in regards to reviewing movies on my Substack newsletter, or my Substack, what's going to do well or what isn't going to do well necessarily, in terms of what will attract more people than not.
Yeah. Much like YouTube, you never know what is, you never know what's going to work, because I have videos on my channel that have over 100,000 views, and then I have videos that have 3 or 4. You never really know what's going to work, and you just put it out there and hope for the best, and advertise it if you can, sure, and promote it, but you do what you can and see what works, and try and do better next time. That's really all you can do.
It's I have to be honest. I've said this to some people. I've said this before. I'm new to marketing and promotion in general. I was a journalist for 22 years. I was a freelancer for 22 years. My job was to write articles. I didn't have a magazine say to me, okay, we're going to print your article in this month's issue. And we've set up two or three, um, we've set up like two or three or four meet and greets at the bookstores. So you go there and talk about the article, and if people want to sign the magazine, once you sign the magazine, you do that. Well, that's what authors do at bookstores. I I don't do that as a writer. I never did that as a writer. So when you're writing for a magazine, I assume the magazine has a promotional staff, a marketing staff, or someone there. Your job as a freelancer and as a writer is to write articles.
Mm-hmm.
Get your articles published, you get paid, and you move on. I never gave any thought to promoting or marketing anything. And once I started creating my Substack newsletters and then creating my podcast, I realized I have to get the word out about that. Well, you're now out at sea. Or you're like Tom Hanks in Castaway. You're on a deserted island. Except I don't have a volleyball to deal with. I just have the algorithm to deal with. And so it's been kind of new for me in the sense of I'm not an expert in this. And I don't want to be an expert in it. I shouldn't say this because the reason I'm here is to promote. The reason I'm here is to market. But I can't help but be honest and say it's not my bag. You know, I like doing interviews. That part is the work. So I'll go on any show. I'll go on a podcast. I'll go on a YouTube show. I'll go on a radio show. I'll go on TV show even and talk. But everything else is such a grind. Putting all your things up on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky and you know, and you know, you realize this is a whole different game that you're not really a part of, that you're a part of, but you're not really interested in. You're just doing this as a utilitarian exercise and necessity. That's what it is primarily. You know, maybe I shouldn't be this honest about it, but you know, I can't help it.
No, I mean, like me, you know, I know I play to a small audience. You know, I don't consider myself a big channel. I am by any means. I consider myself kind of. Yeah, I look at it this way. You have the people who have millions of subscribers. You have kind of what I would call the mid-tier types, you know. You know, your critical drinker, your nerdrotics, you know, those guys, you know, the Doomcocks, you know. I would love to have their audience, but if I get there, I get there. And if I don't, I'm not really worried about it because, you know, I consider myself on that kind of lower tier where I do have this audience that continues to come back for show, week to week. You know, I am more concerned about losing that audience than really gaining another. You know, I'm more like, I'll name some of the people who are in the chat right now. I would rather do a show where, you know, just JP and Kronos are watching, or that Connie is watching, you know, instead of somebody who will maybe come by once and never watch it again for whatever reason, you know, because for one thing that was going on for a while was that YouTube really kind of buried my channel. And I sort of, and one of the reasons why I did the rebranding was kind of out of necessity. Was what's the point of doing this? And especially a show like this where I'm bringing other people on to talk about their channels or talk about whatever projects that they want to do. I've had other YouTubers on here. I've had film directors on here. you know and these are people that I want my audience to come to know. But if nobody is watching my show to begin with, then I have to, by necessity, put myself out there. And if YouTube, and I've spoken out on this before, but if YouTube buries my channel and people are coming to me going, I can't find you, then I had to, out of necessity, to rebrand, which I was perfectly fine with, and now more people are coming in, newer people are coming in every day, and they're sticking around, and I'm able in that fashion now to build my audience in a way that I hadn't before. But, again, you never really know what is going to work until you've done it. I have a show Unscripted, which is just basically a stream of consciousness, me going on for an hour on a certain subject, and I agree. There are episodes of that are better than others, and episodes where I'm higher energy than others, but the point being is I never expected anyone to care about that program, because another guy on YouTube giving his opinion on something, big deal. Everybody does that,
Yeah.
But now it's my longest running show. And I have this loyal audience that, because they're masochists, I guess, come back every week and listen to me drone on about, Disney, or something that happens in the political sphere, because I tried with that show, I do try to stay more topical and with it and today than I do with other shows. But again, you never know what's going to work until you do it. And you do have to, and this is something that I have to get used to doing, because my mindset doesn't go there, because I kind of agree with you on that, because just sitting there and, typing up something and letting everybody know that you're coming on, and then you're sending it to this platform and that platform, that's something that's new to me. There are people here who are much better at that than I am.
Yeah.
But,
right. It's part of the grind. With YouTube, here's the thing with YouTube for me. For me, I'm not really a content creator. I technically do a little content. I have a show called Outro, which is about being interviewed on shows. So I'll do an episode about this probably tomorrow. And I have my sports show, The Wise Guy Show, and I had to do an episode of that. But I'm not really a content creator. I view YouTube as a promotional and marketing arm of what I do, which is elsewhere. So I have a different view of YouTube than a lot of people are. I don't understand people who want to turn YouTube into a job for themselves and want to be monetized and all that. But maybe it's because they had crap jobs and nothing really went. This happened years ago where people were really kind of turned into stars because of YouTube. Those were kind of the older days when I used to watch YouTube, to watch people on YouTube and channels. When I think YouTube actually made stars. It's not that they don't make stars now, but I think a lot's changed with YouTube. I don't think it's really about making stars anymore. I think it's about becoming kind of another corporate aspect, another corporate concern. And it'll eventually be corporate type shows and typically produced type of shows eventually on YouTube. And again, for me, YouTube is primarily about marketing and promoting everything I do outside of YouTube. So although technically I do a little content on writer Albert Lanier, my YouTube channel, it's really just an official channel for that.
Mhm.
So I have a different way of using YouTube. I use YouTube. YouTube doesn't use me. That's the difference. I think with a lot of people, they're afraid of YouTube. I see this in watching some channels sometimes, and or having also watched channels. It's like you see people on their panels, or you get on their panels, and I don't do panels anymore. For example, I only do interviews. If I go on a panel, I have to promote something. That's my policy. I can't go on someone's panel just on a regular panel and not promote something. I have to be interviewed. So that's one of the things that's changed. So it's about if you're using YouTube and not allowing YouTube to use you. The problem is a lot of people end up getting used by YouTube because they think they're going to master the algorithm. And I'm sorry, the algorithm will master you. And it will probably lead to a disaster for a number of you because you don't understand that you cannot do whatever you want on YouTube. Cannot do it. And if you think you're going to play games, I'm sorry, it'll be game over for you. So that's something people have to understand. Again, for me, it's a promotional marketing. I use YouTube to just promote what I'm doing elsewhere. And what few couple shows I have, they serve a purpose. And, you know, and I'm an outspoken critic of the so-called YouTube film reviewers and critics anyway. So I don't do film on YouTube. I don't do reviews. I write reviews. So, I mean, I use my community page on my channel to promote my reviews and everything. But yeah, I think it works for me because I understand that I use it and I use it for a different purpose. I don't allow it to use and abuse me. And it's not really in a position to do so. But sort of getting back to movies, what are some movies that you're interested in?
Well, I'm a little all over the place when it comes
Okay.
to movies, because I'm one of those guys who can go from I could watch some Hammer horror movie 1 minute, and then when that's done, I can put on the right stuff or Black Bag or Jaws or something like that. I'm kind of whatever I am in the mood for at that particular time. I'll watch it, and you know, uh, it kind of really does depend. You know, uh, I don't like. Well, I tell you what, I don't like in film is I don't like movies that get nihilistic, like purposefully mean spirited. When I'm talking like a movie where when you're done watching it, you want to take a shower. I'm not particularly down for that. There was
I
a
see.
time there was a time in my life where in my 20s where I would watch everything and I'm like, I will seek out the controversial films and I will, hit me with your best shot. I can take it. But now that I'm older, I look back and like I don't really need to see anything like that, that's just made to depress people or seemingly degrade the actors that are in the film. And I don't really need that, and that's why I tend to, especially nowadays, go for, just go back and make that entertainment again that we used to see back in the 80s. And, where are the Raiders of the Lost Arks? And, where are the Tremors, and all these, movies that you could just go to see and have fun, you know, or, something that might make you think on a certain subject. But if you're just there to be, the sad sack downer, make everybody depressed walking out of the theater movie, I don't have time for that anymore. Yeah, it's like that's
Well,
my opinion on
I
it.
think you're complaining different movies. Those are different movies in different areas of filmmaking.
Mhm.
So, you know, again, I think the major the major studios are probably making the kinds of broad kinds of entertainments. Again, what you're seeing are pre-sold movies, pre-sold audience movies, right?
Hmm.
You know, you had an Indiana Jones movie that came out, I think, a couple of years ago. But the reality is that movies exist for different times, and they exist in different times. And so I understand, as somebody who used to review movies and who also informally reviews movies. I basically call myself a film analyst who analyzes films. You understand, as somebody who reviews movies in the past, that movies get made in the time they get made. And some movies aren't really meant to be made if you consider the vicissitudes and vagaries of the business, the film business, but they end up getting made anyway. So the reality is that a movie you can't replicate the past. You can no more replicate the past in terms of movies than you can replicate the past in terms of politics, or you can replicate the past in terms of economics, or you can replicate the past in terms of anything else. You know, mm, even types of food to a certain extent. What's popular in terms of people. So the problem that I hear with some people sometimes is what they want. Basically, it. I because I deal with movies from the past, I understand that I enjoy them as museum pieces. Because that's what I think movies of the past are. They're basically museum pieces. They're relics. They are made in the time and in the year and in the decade that they were made, and reflect that time in that year and that decade. You have to look at the movies now that reflect this time and this year and this decade. And those are the movies that are being made. And those are the movies that you have to find the movies that you're interested in, right? You can remake movies. For example, I think they're remaking Silent Night, Deadly Night, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they have. It's out right now. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So let me just note that you can remake Silent Night, Deadly Night, but you can't replicate the original, which is very controversial. Mm-hmm. And I think a hybrid movie. It was a horror movie and a drama placed together.
Agreed.
I tend to believe that movie is very powerful. And I think it presses buttons probably with people. It's very interesting. the remake might be good, or it may be bad, or maybe mediocre even. But you can't replicate the past. And so, to me, what's important about that movie is that main character's life. The guy who goes and becomes, as I like to call him, swinging Santa, because he's swinging an axe. That movie is important because it's this hybrid movie, really. And so that, to me, but you can remake that movie, but you can't really gain the essence of that movie. Any remake is going to be different because it's made in a time that's different. It's made under conditions that are different. Everything's different. You can't go back. You cannot go back. It's interesting. I saw a bunch of Christmas horror movies about this time last year. I did a series. I used to see horror. I used to see movies on Christmas Day. That was kind of a tradition of mine. I'm trying to decide, what should I do? I'm not going to do horror movies this year. I'm thinking, what should I do? Should I do comedies, drama? I have to decide that soon because it's coming up on the end of the year. So it's going to be interesting. But I think you have to enjoy the movies of the past and love them or like them or respect them or admire them, or simply judge them on what they were and what they are, and not what you want other films to be like. And I think that's really important. And that's important with my retro review newsletter because I deal with movies in the past. So I want people to go out and see those movies that I recommend. I don't really want you to see the movies I don't recommend, although if you want to, you could. For example, when I started the newsletter, like I said, the first movie that I did on the Final Cut section, so the retro review section of Final Cut, was the movie The Late Show with Lily Tomlin and Art Carney. But the first movie I reviewed for the newsletter was a movie called Real Genius from 1985, which is one of my favorite comedies from the 80s. I love that movie. Oh, yeah. Absolutely adorable. Fantastic. It's a wonderful movie. And I kicked it off by doing actually 2 reviews. I usually do 2 reviews at a time. And the second film I did review, because I gave 4 stars to Real Genius, the second movie that I reviewed was Porky's Revenge. And I gave that 1 star. And I trashed that movie. I'll make no bones about it. I turned that movie into pure pulp. Because it's a terrible, horrible movie. And I was kind of surprised when I look back at that review. I'm kind of surprised at that review because it was one of the most upfront. I could never have written that review, even when I could never have written that review for a newspaper. If I were writing for a newspaper, if I were movie reviews for newspapers, and I did it online when I did film reviews years ago. But if I were writing for a newspaper, I couldn't write that review for a newspaper because it's too raw and it's too honest. But what I have found in doing retro review these past months, and even in the section last year and some of this year, is getting people to, what I'm about is I'm advocating for movies. And that's the big difference. I'm advocating for movies in the past. When I was a film reviewer, I wasn't an advocate for movies because that's not your job. You could say you're an advocate for movies in general, but your job is not to really be an advocate for a movie. That's the job of a marketing person or the job of the director, the cast. They're there to advocate for their movie. I'm not. I can recommend the movie to people as a reviewer, but that's not my job. What's different with retro review is I'm about advocacy. I'm about saying, this is, yes, I've reviewed this. It's a good movie. It's a great movie. But it's not enough for me to say, yes, it's a good movie and a great movie. It's, you need to see it. You should see it. In fact, I need you to see it. And that's the big difference between what I did years ago and what I do now. To me, a movie like Real Genius, it's not enough for me to say, this is a wonderful comedy set on a polytechnic college campus. It's, you need to see this movie. And it's not run, don't walk, or all the other cliches of the past. It's get to the streaming service, get there, look at this movie, and more importantly, support this movie. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell the IRS agent or whoever's auditing your business or whatever it is that you're about. Tell them, and that's what it is for me now. That's what Retro Review is about. And so, you know, that's where I am, and that's what that newsletter ultimately is for me. It's ultimately about advocating for movies, which is something I'd never done before. Anyone can do a review of a movie, but it takes someone to work for the movie. I'm about working. I'm about supporting movies. My reviews are not simply reviews. They're a means of advocacy and a means of support. And that's where I am in terms of Retro Review and what I'm about with that newsletter. You know, but you have to appreciate the movies from the past as films that looked at what occurred in that period. And you have to appreciate the movies presently as what occurs now. You know? Unfortunately, this isn't Back to the Future. If you had a plutonium-powered DeLorean, you could go back to 1985 and watch all the movies that came out that year, including Back to the Future. But you don't. So, great Scott.
Indeed. Well, I do want to acknowledge some of the people who've joined us in the chat since we've begun the show. Of course, Netters Network, bringing the Geeky Geezers raid. Of course, Troy Pacelli, sitting alongside her, of course. The Bird Woman of YouTube, Connie Cleary. Channel member JPRPH1. Kronos, of course. And Sean O'Rourke. Good to see you, sir. Please check out Sean's channel. All right. Well, it's that time of night. Let's start kind of wrapping things up. Let everybody know one more time where they can find you.
Well, yes, you can find the Retro Review newsletter on Substack. You can go to thumbsdown.substack.com. That's thumbsdown.substack.com. That's where you can find my movie review newsletter. So check out the reviews and subscribe so I can thrive. Again, that is the Retro Review newsletter. Unfortunately, they call it Finals Substack. For some reason, I can't put Retro Review up there, but it's really known as Retro Review. And you can go to thumbsdown.substack.com to check out that newsletter on Substack. I also have a promo page on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, go here. Go to the Final Cut and Retro Review publications page, or publication page, I believe it is. The Retro Review, or should I say Final Cut and Retro Review publications page on Facebook. And follow and like. I have, of course, images from movies. I also have ads for my, not ads, but I have promos for my newsletter in general. I have 3 of them that I did, which are, you know, pictures from movies. So The ad, of course, not the ad, but the promo is upon further review. That's the name of my promotion for my newsletter. So that you can find, the promo images for my reviews and items. Not only my reviews on my newsletter, but also of anything else on my newsletters, both retro review and Final Cut. And there are also some galleries for movies, and some other stuff, I think, that's there. Again, that is the Final Cut and Retro Review publications page. That's on Facebook. Again, that's on Facebook. And that's the promo page for my newsletters on Substack. So again, to wrap that up, my film review newsletter, thumbsdown.substack.com. That's Retro Review. And of course, my promo page for both my newsletters, including Retro Review, the Final Cut and Retro Review publications page. And you can find that on Facebook. And I guess I should also note my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is at writer Albert Lanier 3434. I don't do film stuff on my YouTube channel, but I recommend you check it out. There's some special live streams where I talk about certain things, which have been kind of unexpected, including what I mentioned about my YouTube recap live stream. So that's at writer Albert Lanier 3434. That's my YouTube channel, or it's the writer Albert Lanier channel. So that's on YouTube.
Right on. All right. As for myself, tomorrow I'm hoping to fit in an unboxing video. That will be, of course, before I leave for the Mystery Movie Night, which means that the Mystery Movie Night podcast will take place this Tuesday at 7 p.m., where I will once again be joined by Sin's Corner, Wilkie's Movies and Music, Kyle Corwith, and Off the Cover, reviewing probably it looks like Song Song Blue. We'll see, but it's fitting in with all the clues that Regal is giving us. That'll be at 7 p.m. Tuesday. Wednesday, I will be joining Sergeant Giratina on his channel for a discussion of the Charlie Brown holiday specials. Thursday, I will be joining Outlaw Bill for Action Theater. This week's movie is Fat Man with Mel Gibson and Walton Goggins. And then, of course, later that night will be my program, Coming Attractions, where you get to find out what I'm doing next week. All right. So I'd very much like to thank everyone who is joining us on X. I can't see you, but I know that you're there. I want to thank everybody who joined us here in the live chat, and everyone who comes upon this broadcast later on. Hope that you enjoyed the show. Hit the like, share out the stream, say hello in the comments. Please be kind. No.
But don't rewind.
Exactly. All right. So, Albert, thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule for and coming on the broadcast. Folks, next week is going to be a special episode. And I don't want to give too much away, but there are going to be some changes coming to the Sunday night schedule. And I'm going to be bringing a few folks on to talk about it. So stay tuned next week at 11 p.m. for the next episode of Reserved Seats, the last one for the year. All right. So, as I always say at the end of every broadcast from HQ, and all points north, south, east, west, and beyond, good night. Take care. Stay strong. Be safe and healthy, because this is how we win.
sifting through the noise with a culture attack. Pop culture, films in the world we see. Deleted scenes where the truth runs free. Take care, stay strong, we're breaking the mold. Be safe, stay healthy, let the story unfold. From watch parties, reviews to the news we spin. Deleted scenes, yeah, this is how we win. Take care, stay strong, we're breaking the mold. Be safe, stay healthy, let the story unfold. From watch parties, reviews to the news we spin. Deleted scenes, yeah, this is how we win. Yeah. Steve out on your YouTube, bro, let's roll.
That's all, folks.